into this wave, you can go into the other dimension.
Yeah, we'll get more into that, and I'll ask you, Freeman, in the next segment, do you think that we're seeing the beginning of the staging of World War III? What's all this heading towards? We'll be back with our guest, Freeman, from freemantv.com. Has it been a few days, a few months, a few years, a few thousand years? How long has this system of control been around? Well, if you look in the direction of the Gnostics and the Nag Hammadi texts, which were written in 400 AD and discovered in 1945, they describe a robotic, drone-like system of control that's been around for, well, since the beginning of the Earth, since the beginning of the human species, perhaps even prior to that. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute, but to follow in the footsteps of what we were just talking about with these movements, which may be major steps towards the next major war, World War III, I want to ask you, Freeman, there's a lot of debate within the conspiracy research community over factions. And if people listen to the Alex Jones worldview of the New World Order, there are factions. So there's the East versus the West. But there's another perspective out there when we look at how some of these military technologies have been distributed, if you will, by the military-industrial complex and its corporate subsidiaries all around the world, to North Korea, China, to Russia, different parts of Europe, the United States, Canada, all this joint sharing of high-tech weapons technology to control populations. So my question to you, Freeman, is do you think this next conflict, which may take place, and my projection is the peak of the next solar cycle, so I'm looking at 2023 or 2021 to 2025, actually. Do you think this is a genuine conflict that we might see, or do you think that this is being staged by the same controllers to trick us into thinking that there are factions? Human factions bidding for power instead of something a little bit more sinister and mysterious.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because each of the ancient races that control planet Earth have extraterrestrial history. They all tie back somehow, some way. You go to China, they talk about their space brothers. You go to Native Americans, their space brothers. You go to Sumerians, you'd almost believe they're talking about space brothers. Egypt, there was nothing more alien on planet Earth than Egypt. So there's this level of the situation, but there's an obvious difference between the races. And there's seems to be a battle of mindsets that goes on with this as the different structures of society play out. But what we're dealing with are what I call sorcerers, or the people that manipulate masses of people. Now, so when I'm looking at a situation, I'm often wondering if they're working in cahoots. As I look at Ahmadinejad, and he's a 9/11
Right.
truther. He's coming out about HARP. He's talking about chemtrails. He's a guy that I'm like, wow, I kind of like this guy, and
yet, the guy's calling for a new world order.
Right, absolutely, and it's the same piece of the puzzle, but yet you wonder what the mechanism is, where the warfare, where the conflict comes in, because when we're looking at what's happening in Iraq and Iran, for me, that's Samaria. And so if you start to add in the ancient civilizations and the potential of ancient astronauts into the puzzle pieces, then things start to kind of make a little more sense, because Iraq, Iran being the ancient Samaria, that is the key focal factor of ancient astronauts. That would be where the gods landed if this were the truth. And there's so much evidence there to suggest that this is the case, because we have like Baalbek, Lebanon, that has 1,200-ton stones right? We have nothing in the 21st century that could ever even consider lifting one of these stones. And yet these are all perfectly placed there in Baalbek, Lebanon, 6,000 years ago, right? Or 4 conservatively. It's amazing when you start to understand this ancient past. And then you start, on my website, I have every ancient astronaut artifact I've ever found. I go through museums after museum, and I take photographs, and have a whole photography section of Mason temples and ancient weird artifacts. So for me, the puzzle often goes back to that, and when it does, then it all starts to make sense. Now, what we're dealing with now, the potential of these asteroids not even being the false flag asteroids that Zernovsky's talking about, but the actual incoming bolides and the striking of the planet. If you are a generation or of a civilization that had been around 52,000 years, and this is the type of time span we're talking about for ancient civilizations, 10,000 and on into 50,000 years ago, then you know the cycles of the galaxy, because at this point we just know the cycles of our solar system. But those that have been traveling around this solar system for a lot longer know the cycles of that. And if there is a potential that we have a binary star, a second sun in our system, as many of the solar systems do. And one group believes it's a star known as G1.9. I'm following that one because it actually is the Firefox logo, and I mean they look identical. It's so G1.9, there's potential of a binary sun. If we're being pulled into that second sun, which all the esoteric studies talk about, then it's also pulling in all of these other bodies and bolides and asteroids because of the gravity well that's being formed from 2 suns coming close to one another. And this would also increase all the heating of all the planets, increase the atmospheric regions around in space, you know, the new radiations that were coming. But it seems that these guys have had a history that has given them knowledge enough to know about more of the ancient past and what our planet has gone through. And when we invaded Iraq, you know, they stormed the museum. They took very specific amulets and stelas and very specific things out of the museum in Iraq. The American military did, you know, and these throw up questions as to what's really going on.
Yeah. And that's a really good point that you made, Freeman, about these changes in our solar system that are beyond what we can see and what we can identify, at least those of us on the ground without the secret knowledge. What we do know about are the solar flare cycles. And what we can learn about, what people can Google right now as they're listening to the show, is type, quote, solar cycles and cycles of war, cycles of consciousness, cycles of revelation, cycles of earth changes, all correlating with solar maximums. But there's something else going on in our universe that's affecting the sun itself. And that's something that is a mystery to a lot of us. Freeman, I want to go now to our phone call from the 620 area code. Caller, what's your name and where are you calling from?
Mike from Kansas.
Mike, welcome.
Thank you. Freeman, good to talk to you again, my good man.
Yeah, hi, Mike.
I used to talk a lot with you about the space war.
Oh, yeah?
A couple years ago, yeah. I have a couple thoughts to share with you about the Pope. Do you remember Illuminati agent Leo Zagami said years ago that our next Pope would be a man named Francis Arends, who is black? So I'm heavily betting that the Pope's replacement, if not Arends, will indeed be a black man. And I find that interesting. And with the meteor in Russia, when it first came close enough to be photographed, it had twin exhaust. It had a pair of a side-by-side exhaust, parallel exhaust laying down.
Plumes, there were 2 running together.
Yeah, 2 plumes. And it came in with, to my mind, that signified that it had some sort of twin main engine, like sort of like a space shuttle. But the only thing we have on the overt side right now would be more like European Space Agency Ariane 5 thrusters. They would do that. And my other thought on the meteor is when you mentioned Kal-El, the voice of God, who lands on planet Earth in just such a way. Right. To probably be a Messiah, you suppose?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I hear the Illuminati right now are trying to figure out who their Lucifer character is. It could be this Francis Arends. A lot of people think he's already here, like Arends, or he could be arriving shortly or just a couple days ago.
Well, I swear, if people understood my belief in Barack Obama being a clone of Akhenaten,
I
the
do.
Rest of the family. Now, but the deeper side of this, you see, Akhenaten's written about in The Secret Destiny of America. He is the founder of the Rosicrucian order. He is the very epitome of everything that we see. Every Masonic temple has a shrine to Akhenaten, the Rosicrucian Museum. And then, he is the epitome of the ancient astronaut, of course, because he's the strange man that flipped Egypt on its head and told them, no, you're not going to worship many gods, you worship one. Akhenaten is so critical to the occult brotherhood that is involved in a controlling planet right now. Why wouldn't they bring the family back? And when we look at the faces, at Michelle, at Barack, and the children, they're identical to this single family. But to me, this is so critical because of the all of the connections that it lays out for the occult brotherhood, who they would have as their antichrist, why they would name him Lightning from Heaven, which is Barack Obama, why they call him Renegade in the Secret Service, which is also what they called Akhenaten, and then how he ended up battling his ancient satanic nemesis, Apophis, as an asteroid threat, is beyond me. And as I'm watching right now, the International Space Station has a device on it that opens a view to the anti-universe. And it's put up there by a corporation named Grawlator. And their corporate logo is a big red reptilian claw. And, this is connected with the Pope. They've got their Lucifer telescope, right? The Vatican has the Lucifer telescope looking up into these space objects that are coming down. And they really had to work to make that telescope named Lucifer. It's like the light ultra sensing, they had right. words to make it Lucifer. So we're starting to look, and all of my studies and everything have shown me to this connection with the number 66. And as I got there, and I realized that 66 is VW 666, and how it all came together. And the 66 is the symbol of the abyss, or that space where the demons exist, that place where Coronazone exists, and Typhon. And every symbol that I see everywhere I go, from Madonna on the Super Bowl, you'll see her with the VV and the OX. And, of course, in English, F, O, and X are the 6, 6, and 6 of our language. To have OX up on the stage, which actually turns out, according to occultists, to be the mark of the beast, which is the symbol on the beast when he's wearing it with the X-Men. That Freeman. Is the mark of the beast, according to the occultists. Freeman. So I'm watching this. Every aspect of our world is saying we worship these fallen angels. I don't know what any of this means, but then I see on the scientific end, and of course CERN's corporate logo is 666, and they're punching holes in the other dimension, and they have this device on the space station to see the anti-universe with its red reptilian claw on it. And I'm watching as they're developing this mind transfer technology, getting the computer grid, the LHC grid of CERN, up to capabilities of being able to transmit souls through radio frequency waves, that they're opening up portals with these other devices. I mean, it's all right there, and it all goes back to this fallen angel connection and symbol.
And also, Freeman, we are carbon-based life forms, right?
Yeah, 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons.
That's right.
I'm not ready to give the Bible that much credit on their